Hello everyone, and welcome to our Reach E series of training videos. My name is Dominic, and I will be guiding you through the materials as well as the videos themselves. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to look further into the Reach E materials with me. Today's video is the first in our Reach E series and will tackle reading in our classes. The Reach E materials are new materials aimed towards G4, G5 students. So for HE teachers, this is right up your alley. However, for Reach teachers, you're used to a little younger student in your class, so this one will be a little bit different for you. So they will have their reading, listening, writing, etc., all their skills enhanced as they go through the course. As was mentioned earlier, today's video will tackle reading only, so let's have a look at the lesson itself. So here we have the lesson. The Reach E course at the moment, the one that we're currently activating with our students, revolves around animal intelligence, hence the title. Yay, title. So each lesson will look at different aspects of animal intelligence. For instance, in the reading lesson, students will be given the opportunity to learn about the clever chimps of Fongoli. It won't be listed here, so you'll have to go on and look at that after the warm-up. So let's move on to the warm-up first and get the students ready for the class. Moving on. So when you move into the warm-up, of course, it'll be blank like this. I've uploaded the PPT as the HTML link was not available as of this recording. However, the PPT will show you exactly what the HTML link or the actual lesson will look like in class. So first question you'll have is, do you have any pets? Most students will answer that right away. No, yes, what they want, what they do have, what they don't have, what they want in the future. Moving on to the next question, are they smart, etc.? Yes, no, they're stupid, they're smart, yeah. And then you'll see the big question, how smart are animals? Now this question is very important because it will be repeated over each lesson or each part of the Reach E series. So in reading, in listening, in writing, this question will be repeated and students will be asked to answer that. So it'll be interesting to see how their answers will differ per week or how they remain the same. So you may want to review that each class with the student based on their previous week's answer. So have them answer all the questions and then move on to the springboard about chimpanzees, as the class will be about chimpanzees. Before you want to ask this question, ask them if they think chimpanzees are smart. Yeah, and then we'll find out how smart they are indeed by moving on to the front page. Now, after the warm-up comes the front page. On this page, students are introduced to the lesson itself and to the reading strategy of the lesson, which is preview and predict. This is the reading strategy that will be reinforced throughout the lesson. So on this page, the student will have a look at the front page itself. Now, for this lesson, there are three aspects to the front page: the title, the picture, and then the caption at the bottom. What I like to do before getting the student to read is I like to see if they know what the elements are. So I'll have them, do you know the three main parts of a front page? A lot of students can get it, some students can't, but it's good to give them that option at the beginning. So of course we start with the title, and then the student will read the title itself. And then some questions will be asked about that, like where do they live? The student will be asked, oh, they live in a place in Fongoli. There we go. And then, are they smart? Yes, they're smart. How do you know? And then use the title to reinforce that. See if they can relate the word clever to being smart. And then the picture, they will be asked to describe the picture itself, what they can see. Ask more WH questions to get them to describe the picture more. And then the caption itself. Now, a lot of students don't know what the caption is. I mean, they understand what it is, but they don't know the word. So you may have to help them define this word before you move on to the next part. All right, so let's move on to the next part, the final part of preview. It's getting the student to read this short paragraph here. This is quite important for a number of reasons. Most important is that you actually get to, for the first time, gauge how your student reads. At this point, you'll be able to understand how easily the student will be able to move through the class, or how much time you're going to need to spend with them to actually help them through the class, and what you may need to skip over later on. At this point, you can gauge your time management for the class. I'll go into more about that later. So get them to read this and then answer the question after they finish reading. What problem do those chimps have? and it's the first sentence. Try not to assist as much as possible, because not only do you want to gauge their reading, but you want to know if they're actually understanding what they're reading. So this concept check question, or CCQ, will really help with that. Of course, the answer is there for those who struggle. Don't spend too much time here, because there's a lot more that we need to get through. So we're done with previewing. So we can go ahead and go over that again. So we've done the first part here. We've read the title. I read about chimps. Looking at the pictures, I see chimps walking on the ground. Now we move on to number 2. Beginning to read. We read that first paragraph, and we're going to make predictions now about what you think will, or how you think the chimps will get food. Then later on, after we finish reading, we will check your predictions, and then we will understand if you had made the right prediction or if it wasn't right. So after you've done that, now we come up to the prediction part. I will try to get 2 predictions at least. All my students that I've had in Reach e-reading have been able to get at least 2. Some have given more because they're more talkative that way. But try to get at least 2 out of them, because you want to have some options later on. You want to give them as many options as possible and get them to predict how the chimps can get more food. And tell them that you'll check that later on. So after you've done with previewing and predicting, it's time to introduce the lesson itself. So there are 4 main sections. 4 main sections, or 4 main parts to the reading part of the lesson itself. We have Home on the Range, Champion Chimp Watcher, etc., etc. In this part here, we'll be getting the students to match the relevant question with the right section. So, yeah. Very straightforward, very quick exercise. Again, don't spend too much time here. Okay, look at the questions, read them if you have to, but match them with the right title. And then after they've done that, you can just move on. Congratulate, of course. If you want to give them a reward each time they get a right one. I'm not going to tell you how to do your class or how you give your rewards. But again, the point is, it's just a warm-up activity. Don't spend too much time here, because you will see later why we shouldn't. So now we actually move on to the reading part itself. Let me open that here. All right. Sorry, I had to split this into multiple PPTs, as one PPT was too large to fit onto FC. All right, so now starts the actual reading section. Okay, so this is the fun part. This is where we get the students to read. And as you saw in the specific, or in the previous slide, there are 4 sections. So we got part 1 here, moving on to part 4, or section 4. A couple of sections will have extra activities. Part 1 and part 3 have extra activities. Now you may, depending on the student's reading level and how quickly they can read, or how quickly they can get the concept. Like, some students may be very quick at reading, but they don't actually understand what they're reading, so you have to spend more time with them on that page, getting them to understand what they've just read. Whatever it is, if they're a slow reader or if they're slow to understanding what they've read, you may need to triage the lesson. You may need to do triage on the lesson itself and cut out the things that are not entirely necessary to completing the objective. Now, the objective of the lesson is to get the students to read the sections and to understand using main ideas and details. So if we have a look at part 1, here is the actual reading. Now, you have the extra activity where they have to choose which one is a Fongoli chimp. This is pretty quick. I usually do this, but if you find that you're really struggling for time at this point, by all means cut it out. But the main thing that the student needs to complete on each section is they need to read, and then they need to find the main idea and the details of each section. This is really, really important. So usually the students will have a hint or have a lead-in question, such as, what do you know about Fongoli chimps, after reading the paragraph. And then they will look at that and they will try to find out what they know. Usually most students will say they live in Fongoli. Great, they live in Fongoli. Tell me more about where they live. Okay, they live on the ground, so that's the main idea. You may have to help them lead in. With most of my students, actually, I had to lead them in to get the main idea for the first and second sections of the reading, because they struggled with that a little bit, as well as the details. However, I noticed by the third and the fourth sections, they were doing it quite well by themselves. They already had the idea or the understanding of how to do that. But that's not the same with all students. Your students may get it right away, or they may need a little bit more coaching. So once you've got the main idea, help them get the details. Usually, again, lead-in questions can help them get the details as well if they need it. If not, they can get it themselves. Great. Move on to the next section. Okay. Now you'll see here that it's just reading, main idea, and details. Finish that. Done. Yeah. So again, you won't need to do any extra activities in part 2, but part 3 is quite long. You have more extra activities. After they've finished reading, we now need to help them go through first, and then putting sentences in order, ordering the pictures, that kind of thing, and then again ordering the pictures again. So what I like to do here, if I know I'm not going to have time to do the extra activities, is after the student has finished reading this part here, I'll ask them if, because a lot of students get affected by these chimps hunting and eating and killing bush babies with their stick and eating them like a barbecue. So what I would like to do here is usually ask them if they've seen a bush baby. Now, 90% of the time they say they haven't. So luckily for me, I can move on to the next part here, because you don't want to tell the student that you're going to skip pages as much as possible. Sometimes you're like, okay, we're running out of time, so we have to move ahead. But you'd like to make up strategies to make it seem less obvious. So I've just skipped through a bunch of pages to find the bush baby. Oh, look, there's the bush baby. Isn't it ugly? It looks like a tree rat. Or isn't it cute? Don't you just want to hug it? Depending on your student. Most of my students love it. I still think it looks like a tree rat. Anyway, so that's how I skip ahead. Sometimes you'll need to be more obvious and say, okay, we're running out of time, so we're going to jump ahead to the next section now, which is main idea and details. That's if you need to. However, some students breeze through it. They understand quickly, they read quickly. That's fine. So you can go through all of that. If you can keep it in, do it. By all means, just do it. But if you cannot, triage. Don't sacrifice the main objectives of the lesson, which is to finish reading and understanding what they've read through finding main idea and details of each section. Now, the part 4, again, reading, finding main idea and details, but with one extra part here that was not included in the other 3 parts, which is sentence structure. Now, for the most part, the students have just been given information about the details like this. Now, with the sentence structure, they get to practice putting those details into complete coherent sentences. Because of limited food and because big males refuse to share, females and young males have to make tools to find their own food, that kind of thing. And that will be practiced later on at the end of the lesson when they retell the story. Okay, now we're done with reading. So we've read everything there. Let me move on to the last part here. Oop, that's not the right one. Okay, there we go. So after we've finished reading, now we check the predictions. Now the student made 2 or more predictions at the start of class. What I like to do with my students is I get them to check their own predictions based on what they've read. It helps them recall what they've said, and it also helps me understand that they know what they've just read, because they can check it based on what they remember. Some students get it right the first time, some don't. Either way, give them a reward. Be encouraging as much as possible. It's a prediction. I mean, it's a 50-50 in this case, or even like 10-90. 10% chance they're going to be right, 90% chance they're going to be wrong. So give them a reward for trying or for getting it right. All right, and then that's it. We're done with checking the predictions, so now we can review the lesson. So reviewing the reading strategy, previewing predicting. We read the title, we looked at the pictures, we made the predictions of that, and then go over the predictions, and then ask the student if their predictions were right or wrong. So that's reviewing the reading strategy, as well as the thinking skills. We practiced main idea and details. Now, this is very important. Main idea and details are very important because it will actually be carried over into all the other lessons of Reach E. So students will be practicing finding main idea and details in listening, in writing, etc. So it's very important that they understand this concept by the end of the lesson, even if they're not, finding the right details or finding the right main idea. At least if they understand it, they've got the groundwork, the framework there to apply it later on in the other lessons. All right, and then we move on to the last, or not the last part, but the review part of the lesson. We're reviewing the main idea and details here. Now, we've already done this a bunch throughout the lesson. We've already done this a lot. So if you can see here, it's like you've got 2 minutes till the end of class, and you know you've already done this and the student understands this. You can skip this part because it's just reviewing main idea, details for each section, each of the 4 sections, that kind of thing. So once you're done here, once you've done reviewing, if you have the time, or if you've had to skip it because you don't have time, we move on to the last part, which is retelling the story. Now here what they'll do is they'll just create a sentence using the sentence structure and the main idea. They live on the ground, or the chimps live on the ground. A chimp watcher found the Fongoli chimps make their own tools. Fongoli chimps make their own tools to hunt. First they break the stick, then they sharpen it with their teeth, then they jab it through the hole to create a bush baby barbecue. And then they have to find their own food because there's limited amounts of food and big males refuse to share, so they have to make tools to find their own food. And then you're done. That's it with the lesson. Make sure that at the end of the lesson, the student has completed reading everything. They've understood what main idea and details are and have attempted or have successfully found the main idea and details of each section, and then they have retold the story. So as you can see, the lesson itself is quite intensive. There's a lot to get through in this section, or in this lesson itself. So the most important thing that you will need to focus on, or that a teacher needs to focus on when they're teaching the Reach material, specifically this reading lesson, is time. Time management is really, really important. It's key here, as each student will learn at a different pace. Be prepared to skip non-essential slides for students that are moving a little slower, while adding in extra CCQs or concept check questions for students that are advanced. If you don't pay attention to time, you might find yourself at the end of lesson having completed only half the lesson. It happened to me. I got to 40 minutes of a class once. I had to extend 10 minutes just to rush through the last parts, but don't do that, by the way. I got to 40 minutes and I was only up to section 2 of the reading. So it's, if you're struggling with time, triage the lesson. Cut out the things that you don't need. Make sure that you've prepared beforehand. You know the sections which are important and which ones are extra activities for those who are breezing through it. So the main thing that you want to complete by the end of the lesson: reading the 4 sections, completing main idea and details, and then retelling the story after reviewing the reading strategies and the thinking skills. All right, so needless to say that while I was doing my first week of Reach E classes, time management was not a big factor for me. So I decided to change my view on that. And it really helped. Understanding the lesson, understanding the flow, understanding my students helped me understand what I could keep, what I should take out, and it helped me deliver a lesson within 40 minutes. Yeah. So that's it. My views have changed about that. The lesson itself is very, very good. It's very interesting. And you'll notice that time flies because there's a lot of information, and the students like to converse about that as well. So be aware of time. Don't ever stop your students from talking, but if you do have a talkative student and you know they like to talk a lot, cut out sections to allocate time for their own talk time. So thank you so much for spending your time with me in this video. Should you have any questions or concerns, please do feel free to message me or your trainer, and I'll do my best to address your concerns or queries. So thank you so much for your time, and I will see you in our next video together. Thanks everyone. Bye.